Great. Thank you. So welcome everyone to our California UDL Network meeting today, October 11th. This is the first in a series of three network meetings this year. So thanks for being with us today. Rhonda Marriott is my co-host and she's letting people in as we get started here. So always want to know who's in the house. So please log in to the chat by giving us your name and your county office, your district or school. Remember that our calls are open to all educators, and drop that into the chat box so we can see who's here today. Just like school, Rhonda, we have to take roll, don't we? So please sign in and we welcome you today. So my name is Fred Cochran and I'm your facilitator today from San Joaquin County Office of Education. I can't believe that this is our fourth year, I believe, of the UDL networks. I'm joined today with my co-pilot, Rhonda Marriott Spencer from Orange County Department of Ed. I think everybody knows Rhonda and it's great to have behind the wheel. So thanks for being co-pilot today. So welcome again. So we have our norms. These are the same norms we started with, asking everyone to follow those. Mute your device that's located in your Zoom toolbar. And feel free to comment, ask questions, use the chat feature during the call. Rhonda will keep an eye on that. Sometimes if you're in the same room with someone else, you probably don't want to have two people logged in right next to each other because it can cause some frequency issues. Today's call will be recorded in case you missed part of the call. And of course, those recordings are in our Share Google folder. Okay. So a couple of optimistic openings because, I'm getting really kind of excited about October. I love this month, probably because I love the candy. But anyway, I just thought, well, let's just don't ever miss out on that magic of your smile. When you flash that genuine smile, it's an open invitation saying you're friendly and willing to interact with others. I love to live by this. I love to watch when I smile and you get someone to smile back at you. It's just really a great thing to happen. You'll also be perceived as more trustworthy and agreeable, and a true smile shows you're willing to cooperate and that you are worthy of another person's time and attention. So keeping that in mind, and I found a happy jack-o'-lantern to share with you today. Now, I also have we want to check in with you to see how you're feeling. If you've seen this before, we love this one, so we want to do a repeat of it again, talking about colors. What color do you feel like today? Because your colors could have started out in one color and they end up in another color all throughout the day, right? So are you in a red zone today? Hopefully not. Being angry, frustrated, or stressed out. Or maybe you're more in an orange zone, being grateful, positive, feeling empowered. Yellow's great too, happy, hopeful, open. Green is good, calm, focused, mindful. Hopefully you're not blue because I wouldn't want you to be sad or down or disconnected. Or gray, but I am a little gray today, so I'm a little bit tired. But we want you to be engaged with us, so hopefully you're not distracted and hopefully you're not anxious because this is your time to collaborate with us and let's make the most of it. So what are we going to do? We're going to pick a color, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, or gray. So before you enter that in the chat, we want you to, we'll do a little waterfall. And when I say, when I count to three, enter your color in the chat and we'll see what colors we have in our audience. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Well, I didn't even get mine in there. Good. Okay. Well, we know we have a small group right now, but hopefully we'll have more folks log in and join us. So this is a good one. Colors is a good way of checking in, and also good to do with children too, because it's another way of identifying mood. So today's learning outcomes, I want you to know these have not changed since we started 4 years ago. Our first outcome is to share best practices. And our second outcome is to capitalize on expertise from participants to support implementation efforts. Today's agenda, so excited that we have voices from the field. We have Chrissy Hess, Jennifer Andrade, and Susan Hughes from Modoc County Office of Education. They are our spotlight today. We're so excited to hear their story. And we will also have time for some collaborating to be able to talk to one another. We'll share resources and some upcoming events today. Okay. So where we keep all of our stuff, we have a shared Google folder. And in there's a subfolder called the California UDL Network resource document. These are our meeting dates that are scheduled. Of course, if you're here for our October 11th session. The next one will be January 24th, and then May 9th. So they are all scheduled from 3 to 4 p.m. And we hope you share that information wherever to whoever you think is interested in learning more about Universal Design for Learning and all the great work that is happening. So it's my honor right now to talk a little bit more about our voices from the field. If you've never been to Modoc County Office of Education, it is way north. I would say it's northeastern California. Does that sound right? Did I get it right? I got my map right. And they have just been great thought partners to have with Universal Design for Learning. I've heard about their great work through other county offices. And as soon as I got to meet Chrissy Hess in person this summer at the MTSS PLI, I said, hey, you've been on my radar. I want to ask you, would you guys present and tell your story? And she openly accepted, and here we are today. So I'm so excited that we're going to hear from our friends from Modoc. I am going to stop sharing, Rhonda, so that Chrissy can share her slides, right?
Okay. Sorry. Make sure
It's
I'm.
okay.
There we go.
You're doing great. Oh, Jennifer Andrade is also sharing. Thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure I limited all the tabs I had so no one went, ah. So, well, thank you, Fred. Thank you for that awesome introduction. My name is Jennifer Andrade, and I am one of 3 members of our continuous improvement team up at Modoc County. And so, like Fred said, this is obviously a map of California, and that red box, that is Modoc County. In fact, like a lot of our state meetings, we'll meet people and we're like, oh, I'm from Modoc, and people are like, cool, where's that? And we have to explain, it's the farthest, northeastern tip of California. In fact, we border the Oregon and Nevada state lines as well. And so to zoom in, because Chrissy and Susan and I thought you can't get the full effect of our county until you really see it zoomed in. Modoc County, we actually, we have 3 school districts within the county that span across 150 miles. We're pretty spread out. As a total, our ADA for the entire county is about 1,200 students. And And within those 3 districts, we have unique demographics, I would say. We have equally disproportionate amount of socioeconomically disadvantaged students. We have a high special education population, but our Modoc Joint Union School District and our Surprise Valley Joint Union School District, they have more of a tribal population, whereas Tule Lake, we're closer to the Oregon border, and we are about 87% Hispanic with a high EL population. So the demographics are pretty unique. And so kind of lending ourselves to how can we, like, in academic wise on this MTSS journey, what academic strategy could exist out there that would speak to all of our learners? So UDL just seemed like it would, work so well. This is an example of a typical traffic jam that you might find in Modoc County. And honestly, like, there is not a day in the last 4 years that I haven't been to Alturas that I haven't encountered a family of deer that cross the street or hanging out in front of our office. They're just there. So it's pretty cool, actually. So that's an example of our traffic jam. And last year we were tasked with the idea of creating a one-pager about all the things that we do. And we always joke as a team that we must do the work of 7 or 8 departments in an average county office. And then we put it on paper and we're like, oh my God, we were joking, but that's really happening. So this is kind of a rundown of what our team does. We really focus on professional development, whether that is academic for our certificated staff, our classified staff, or also our administrators. We support districts in PLCs, whatever they need, we go get trained and come back to them. We support them in our system work, LCAP, state and federal, differentiated assistance, obviously implementing MTSS throughout our county, helping them look at data. We support with PBIS, UDL, and then some. I will give, like, Chrissy some credit. When I first came to the county here, she was training our districts at trauma-informed care well before COVID. So when COVID hit, our staff was ready to roll out with SEL, trauma-informed care. They were prepared, and that was, really due to the work that she had started in our county. So that was huge. And it made me excited when it all, not that COVID was exciting, but that we were prepared for it. And then kind of one of the biggest pieces, I think, is that's unique to our area is that because we're so small, silos can't exist, right? It really truly takes a village, and we have all these partners in our work in supporting students so that they can thrive. Modoc Behavioral Health, our Sheriff's Department, our Police Department, Rotary, Teach, First Five, SISCU Behavioral Health is also recently joined on. So there's a lot of partnerships that provide these wraparound services for our students. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it on to Susan.
Excellent. So that is a lot. And just listening to that, Jen, I'm like getting like palpitations for exhaustion just on, our experience. And I know there's lots of other people on this call that experience that same services. I saw Jody on the call, and Lassen County has a very similar feel. And really what it comes down to is, how do you balance all that? So we talk a lot with other counties where, they get to really focus and be hyper focused on a particular area, whether they're a specific math curriculum instruction, coach. And we don't really have that liberty because we really do it all, and we wear so many hats. And so as a team, we really were having a conversation of how do we go about this work and not get lost? And how do we go about this work and not let something fall off of our plate? And so we really had to find a way to really make it where we had a vision or a North Star. And as a team, as we were looking at all the initiatives and all the stuff we do and all the passion projects we have, you could ask any one of us, what's the thing that we absolutely love? And it would all be a little bit different, but they all have the same premise that they are good for students. And so we really decided that MTSS was going to be our North Star. And Jen, if you don't mind switching slides, I don't know, do I have the ability to switch slides? Sorry, we didn't really think through that piece of it. So with MTSS being a North Star, it really just makes sense for us because it encompasses the whole child. And so for every one of us with our initiatives, that whether it falls in a social emotional or academic and curriculum, UDL, behavior, whatever it is, we can find that has a crosswalk over to MTSS. And for that reason, our team has really decided that is our North Star, and that is our vision, and that's what we really guide. And with that, really the guiding question that we always ask in every single piece is it good for students? Is it good for kids? And if we can answer that question, then we know that we're on the right track. And that really is our, the North Star. Okay, next, please. Yep, so is it good for kids? So you're going to find in our team that anytime something comes down the pipeline in our team meetings, we will ask that question. Is it good for students? Is it good for kids? And if we can answer yes, then we proceed. And what we find is every time we can answer that question that yes, it is good for kids, we find that it aligns with MTSS. So to take you down our little bit of a journey, back in 1617, MTSS was released. And, looking at that whole child, where do you even begin, right? We all do it, but how do we do it with a lot of intentionality and purpose? And we decided between the county office districts and our county partnerships, especially with behavioral health, that really PBIS in the behavior realm was where we were going to start. Well, it didn't take long for us to identify that if you're dealing with behavior, then you really are also focusing on trauma-informed care and social emotional learning, and just how, what are the students bringing? What is their story? What is their voice? And when we listen to them, how does that play into their behavior at school? Now, once we kind of grappled with the trauma-informed care practices, ACE scores, and PBIS, we were able to really then look at Tier 1 with fidelity within MTSS, looking at the academics, the behavior, and the social emotional trauma-informed care. And just when we thought we were really getting it like, right on, we got this, guys, we're doing Tier 1, and we're starting to implement UDL really as our focus, the pandemic hit. And of course, all of a sudden in that 1920 to 2021, we found that no longer were we this perfect triangle, we really are an upside down triangle. And we all saw it in the county, right? We were all having conversations across the state regarding the students are not with us and they're home, then we know that we aren't getting those wraparound services that Jen was speaking to. So when we returned, which we were very blessed and very lucky that we got to be in person in the 2021 school year. So we were on, pandemic shutdown for that March to May, June timeframe. And then we really got to be back in session in that August. But what we found is we had more gaps in services. Not only was the academic gap, but then also SEL and trauma. So we really had a flipped upside down triangle. And we're really looking on how do we get it back into a normal triangle. And so our 21-22 initiative this past year is really Tier 1 with fidelity and putting in Tier 2, Tier 3 supports within a systems timeframe. So we've done that a lot countywide, is getting Tier 2 and Tier 3 services in place. How do we not overwhelm the system? How do we push back a little bit and get Tier 1 back just nailed? And that's really where we are at this point as we're proceeding into 22, 23. And now that we're getting that triangle back into the spot where we wanted to, we're able to really start looking at the UDL back to where we were in 1920. We were trying to kick it off and really get it in there. So if you're looking at MTSS in the bigger picture, you're going to find that we are always doing this crosswalk between our initiatives. And it's something our team does a lot of, is we will look at the big umbrella. So Jen, if you'll click slide for me, please. Then that next umbrella is that we're always looking at how do we bring them all together. So when we are looking at AVID, if we're looking at capturing kids' hearts, if we're looking at restorative practices, if we're looking at UDL, if we're looking at anything that has an acronym, right? We all live in an acronym world. How do we crosswalk that? And how does it make sense? Does it fit our MTSS model and our North Star? And if we can see that it crosswalks between all of those, then we really are looking in the mind frame of what are we doing already and how do we build upon that? And does it fit our North Star so we're not doing one more thing? And that's the celebration that I think our continuous improvement team really looks at, is how do we get all those connections between those, then we really are going off of what are we already doing and expanding rather than layering on another thing that's going to fall off the plate. So those connections. So there's one more click there, Jen, before I pass it over to Chrissy, that if you can get that web on there and all the connections between all the pieces, then you're not going to let that whole child fall through that net. And that's where we really embrace them and make sure the whole child is being met. All right, off to you, Chrissy.
All right, thank you, Jen and Susan. So one of the reasons why we wanted to look at that timeline, because it helps to explain our UDL journey and kind of where that fits in, because at the very beginning, we were really intentional about how we wanted to roll out UDL. So we really started in that 2019-2020 school year. And unfortunately, UDL had a kind of a bad name in our county due to different circumstances and things like that. And so we really began to dive into what is UDL, and we understood that it was really about teaching to variability and the fact that every person has variability. So there's not only variability within the classroom, but there is variability within us, and just the things that we love, the things that we maybe are not as fond of. And so kind of embracing the idea that there is variability in everything that we do. And so as we began rolling out UDL, we very specifically talked about that it was teaching to variability. And that was the term that we used at that very beginning. And so we started, like many people do, with the Coalition of the Willing. And so when we were looking at what is our cohorts going to look like, we created a 5-year plan. And in the note section of the slides, you'll actually see our 5-year plan that we kind of started with and that we revamped a little bit. And so we gave that there to you as to what was our initial idea. And then we're going to talk about kind of how some of those things have changed over time. So during that first year, we kind of looked at who was our cohort of teachers. So all of the districts went through and kind of looked at who are our teachers that are already implementing PBIS and who are already implementing SEL and trauma-informed care in the classroom. Because we didn't want UDL to be one more thing on a plate that was already full and where implementation wasn't happening. And so really looking at where are some of those other pieces already being implemented so that they were ready to implement UDL. And as we've kind of dove even more into all of the pieces of UDL, we know that behavior and that social emotional learning is embedded in UDL under engagement and some of those other pieces. And so having that background for teachers where they were able to easily recognize that made it a lot easier for them. So how our cohort ran that first year was we broke it up and we started with representation, knowing that even though when you look at the framework, it has engagement as the first piece, because that's the first piece that teachers need to look at, but we knew that what was the piece where teachers feel like they have the most say in what's happening. And so that representation piece where they're explicitly teaching was where we started. And so the way that cohort ran was we had them all to come together. We taught that cohort what representation is. We gave them, they had binders that they were looking through. They had digital resources that they were going through. And then they kind of focused in on what was the piece of representation that they wanted to try over the next month. And so they went back to their classrooms and tried it. And the 3 of us went and visited those classrooms, helped them with observations, helped them to identify some of those evidence practices that they were doing that fit into representation. And then they took their one thing that they just loved out of the last month. And so when we came back together, the next training was started with them and what had happened the previous month. So we did what we called make and take. And so every one of the teachers brought their best practice that they had done under representation, and they shared it with everybody in the group, and then shared all of the resources, and they actually made some of the pieces that needed to be made in order to make that piece successful. So then those teachers could go and replicate it in their classroom. And then we spent the second half of the training session looking at action expression. And so we dove into that and we followed the same procedure. So they went and they took it into their classroom. We observed and helped them with that evidence pieces. And then they brought back and they did a make and take for that during our third meeting, which was engagement. And so our plan was to then follow that same pathway, and for these classrooms to be the classrooms where other teachers go and visit. Engagement, we had that the second week of March of 2020. And as you know, the third week of March is when shutdown happened. So we were able to do the training pieces of it, but we weren't able to bring them back together in person, or do some of those other pieces that we had hoped to do. So that's where we ended the 2020 school year, was that first cohort had gone through. And so at that point, we began looking at how are we going to continue the rollout, knowing that we can't bring the districts together in person. We aren't able to do some of those pieces, and school sites suddenly started to be in very different places at the same time. And so we took the concepts of UDL and we UDLized our rollout to the county. And so looking for what are those entry points that our schools needed. So one of our high school was moving to block scheduling. And so Susan met with all of the teachers, because those high school teachers went from, oh, we have 47 minutes every period, to I now have these kids for an hour and a half, and what in the world am I supposed to do with them for a whole hour and a half? And they were feeling overwhelmed by that. And Susan came in and goes, oh, I have the answer for you. The answer is UDL. And so that really helped those teachers to embrace UDL. And again, she didn't even necessarily use the words until later, just I have the answer. And as she began to roll it out to them, one of the very smart teachers in the back of the room goes, hey, this sounds a little bit like that UDL thing that you guys have been talking about. And so, and then we were continuing to support that first cohort that went through and to keep their practice going. And so really that's kind of where we were for that 2020-2021 school year. As Susan mentioned, all of our schools were in session, but some of them were students could choose to be out of the classroom and be virtual. So even though our students were in session, there was that piece going on. And so we made a very specific effort that we're going to maintain what we have going, but we're not going to push and force people to move forward if they're not ready to. So that was kind of that particular school year. The following year we had Katie Novak show up. She was supposed to come in August of 2020. And so we pushed that back a year. So she came and did a county-wide rollout at the beginning of the year when we do all of our teacher trainings. And then we started looking at, okay, so we're already working with block scheduling with the high school. And after she came, one of our districts who had been in DA who said, we really need to look at engagement. And so Jen and I were able to go and start doing their PLCs every month around engagement and UDL practices. We had a middle school that really started to look very intentionally at how do we leverage AVID as that vehicle by which they're doing the strategies and those core competencies within UDL. And it's kind of started with that middle school, and it has kind of branched out to multiple different sites from there, as they're beginning to see that some of those AVID strategies and just some of the AVID principles and the different pieces of that is really helping them to grapple with the how. How do we make this happen? And then we continued again to support those teachers that were in cohort A. And as other teachers are like, what does this really look like? They were those classrooms that they could go in and look at as well. And so that takes us to this year and where we're at this year. And so I'm gonna defer to my team for some of these pieces. So Susan really was kind of is part of that block scheduling and the math grant piece and the AVID piece. So I'm going to let her speak to that.
Thanks, Chrissy. So really in the block scheduling, what it was is I was taking the anxieties of a teaching staff that was trying to really, change their teaching from, like Chrissy said, that 47-minute block to the hour-and-a-half time period. And the first thing I asked them is, what barriers do you anticipate having in this time frame? And we basically just took a UDL lesson plan template where we are taking predictable barriers, and then how do we strategically plan for those predictable barriers within that block scheduling. So initially we had concerns such as the long time to be in class. You know, how am I going to fill the time? We talked about how do I get all the content covered? And just taking those predictable barriers that we, you know, those fears, we started breaking it down and really just asking some really probing questions from the UDL framework. The other pieces they talked about, you know, students being engaged for 90 minutes. It was very easy to talk about engagement, and then we spent PLC time and really dove into engagement. Like Chrissy said, the team didn't really realize we were doing UDL until Katie Novak showed up. And then Katie Novak spoke to them as well as the other districts. And as soon as afterwards they came through, they're like, all right, we get it. You've been doing UDL with us this whole entire time. But then at that point, they were really ready, because the idea of doing block scheduling and coming back off of pandemic was just too much. So to bring in an acronym would have put them over the edge. So we really just UDL'd their experience with block scheduling to make that happen. Currently, we're part of the Rural Math Collaborative. So through that math grant, we're looking at lesson study and student voice. And so we're owning in from that student voice. What are the students telling us about their math experience? And using that as that predictable barrier, then to lesson plan and design, and using the UDL design template for that math grant. I have one of our districts is heavily Avid, and we really just talk about Avid as that vehicle. We have the buy-in from the staff. We've all attended Summer Institute, and in all of our PLCs that throughout the year, we always have an Avid strategy. And with those teams, as we're implementing those Avid strategies, we're talking about not only how are we Wickerizing the lesson, but how do we UDL that lesson? And it's a very simple, we always have those conversations with predictable barriers, high engagement, and are we allowing students to have multiple means of representation? What are they going to need? And really those basic pieces and folding it into those, it's really making this district feel like it's not one more thing. But they are now readily using the term UDL. Woo! No longer, you know, a little word that we're kind of like just kind of moving around. They are ready for it. And now they are very intentional with the practice of UDL planning. And it's not, you know, a word that we're careful with anymore, but we are folding into what they're already doing. So it's not that we are talking UDL, we are talking about how do we plan for students. And we are just using the framework to really meet the needs of our Avidizing, Wickerizing our lessons. What are students telling us? And then what are the barriers that we are experiencing day in and day out, and how do we overcome those barriers? All right, now I'll pass to Jen. Let her talk about that literacy grant.
Thank you. So yes, our there's several literacy grants that are going on in the state, and ours just happens to be our far northern region. That's something unique to our region itself. We're so rural that a lot of our county offices, we kind of band together and do a lot of these things as like a team, right? Teamwork makes the dream work. So we are partnered with their Far North Literacy Grant, and we have it in all 3 districts. And really it's literacy through the lens of UDL, grades 6th through 12th grade. And that's been our focus. So last year was year 1, and we went through as coaches training. And then this year we're onboarding our teachers. We decided that since we've been doing UDL, like we didn't feel like we needed to onboard the teachers last year for like review of the things that they knew. So that's why we brought them in year 2. And in several of our districts, we've started lesson study cycles. So for example, at our elementary school, there's multiple teachers at 1 grade level, so they can actually do a true lesson study model. But at another one of our districts, it is a district of singletons. So lesson study it looks a little different. And so I'll explain that. Part of the literacy grant, it's partnered with CAST, and we're just about to embark on our instructional rounds with CAST. And one of the pieces about the instructional rounds that they do is they really just have the teachers observe each other, and then they come back and they debrief and they talk about what they saw through the lens of UDL. What did they see through the guidelines? Where did they see representation? Where did they see engagement, action, expression, and so on and so forth? And then they talk about those things, map them out, and then they take that information and plan for the next round. And so that's how we modeled the lesson study for our high school full of singletons. Was it doesn't make sense for the science teacher, the history teacher, and the health teacher to all teach the same lesson, but it does make sense for them all they can observe with intentionality and really like live through the guidelines and have those discussions as far as where are they seeing these pieces, so that when they do come back around in the springtime for their next planning session, they again go, okay, we're maybe not all going to teach the same lesson, but let's talk about our barriers. We all have the same students, so we can all speak to the barriers that these students might have. Let's talk about how we can be intentional in our design, and so on and so forth. So like I said, the lesson study got tweaked a little bit for that district, but nevertheless, I'm actually really excited that we're modeling it after CAST. And then, like I said, I mentioned differentiated assistance earlier when I spoke, and that's one of our districts was identified for DA. And originally it started with our focus at chronic absenteeism. And then when COVID hit, it was like, this is kind of silly. Like, we can't track absenteeism when we have kids like out and they're quarantined and they're back. And so it was like, hey, we should probably focus on academics, because that's like kind of a big part that we're identified for as well. And it really became this like, that kind of culminated with, let's focus on engagement, because if they're engaged, guess what? They might want to come to school more, right? And our behaviors will come down and all of these pieces. So that's, as Chrissy mentioned, like we really focused on monthly PLCs where we trained them up at engagement, and just continued that all last year. And then this year focusing on the lesson study cycles with them, and just working with those teachers to implement. So Chrissy, do you want to talk about our MTSS liaisons?
Sure. Also, all three of us that are part of the team, we're also coaches. And so we're in the classrooms coaching individual teachers as well as administrators and staff members. And so one of the things that we implemented this year, which we didn't add on, but I just happened to have right here, is we created a placemat. So we took the UDL framework and put it on one side, and we put our SEL competencies on the other side and laminated it. So teachers that we're working with, when they're talking about, here's a place where I'm struggling, or here's a place where I want to dig in more, we can go, okay, where does that fit into UDL? And kind of taking them on a deeper dive individually into those pieces. And then when they have when we have a teacher that is like, this student is dealing with this behavior, or this is happening in my class and I don't know how to handle it, what SEL skills are missing from that? And then once they've identified those skills, okay, how do we use UDL to teach that and bring those, the teaching of those skills into place? And so that was a piece that we've been looking at this year. And we're also contracting with a company out of Texas, where we're just starting to gather data around that and what our coaching looks like. And so we're constantly being coached as well, and building those skills throughout this year. And so we'll have more information about that in the future. But literally, Susan and Jen were with them yesterday, and I was with them today. And so like, we're literally at the beginning of that process. And as to how we can continue to support our teachers in these areas. And then finally, our MTSS liaison. So this year, we established a MTSS liaison within every school site. These are teachers that are at the school site that have been identified by their admin as somebody who is utilizing UDL and SEL and PBIS, and is able to kind of be an expansion of our team, because it's impossible, as Jen alluded to, for us to be in all places at all times. And so who is that person that is on site that is able to do that work? And so it is a stipend position. But we are meeting with them on a regular basis. We took them to the PBIS conference. We're hoping to take them to MTSS this summer, but really to be a part of our team and to expand the work that we're doing and to be able to reach more teachers in real time. So we're able to be on campus when needed, but they have that go-to person when they need to see modeling in the classroom, or when they just have a question that needs an answer right away. And so that is a piece that where MCOE has worked with the individual districts to kind of help support that work and those MTSS liaisons throughout the county. And so that is where we're at. Those are our next steps moving forward for this year. And that is our journey. So Fred, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Chrissy, Jen, and Susan. That was wonderful. If you have questions for the Modoc team, please enter them into the chat. As we go through closure today, we'll try to, so maybe Chrissy and Jen and Susan can look at the questions and maybe address those in the chat. What we'd like to do next is Rhonda is going to put us together in some breakout rooms. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay. And I apologize because I need to move down. I love this, the deer. That is wonderful. So what we thought we would do today is to, we're going to do one breakout room, but if in your breakout room, you know, say hi, introduce yourself, talk about either your site or your district's current UDL implementation, how it connects to MTSS, or would you like to also discuss what implementation barriers you may currently be facing, maybe some of your next steps or supports you need. So Rhonda's gonna put you in breakout rooms. We're gonna say about 6 minutes, I think, Rhonda, and then we'll have 10 minutes for closing up, okay? And I will join a breakout room too, I think. Great. Well, I hope you were able to have a lively conversation with some maybe new friends that you met today. And we want to be sure that we get through some of the events and announcements. So I'm going to, and be sure that you have any questions, be sure to add them to the chat. Let me get the slides going here. Okay, so you all know that we have the folder, the Google folder with resources. The UDL toolkit is another resource you might be interested in. I've presented this for quite a few years now, and I just have to say, I just hit 47,000 hits on the live binder, so people are looking at it all over the place. So anyway, I try to keep it updated. If you have anything you think would be helpful that maybe I'm missing, please let me know or Rhonda know. So the coalition updates, just some real quick updates. We meet monthly at the steering committee, and we just recently passed our procedures for the coalition. So we're looking forward to our next meeting to kind of look at where our next steps are going to be. This information we've shared at previous calls with you all, but in case you don't know about the coalition, it is a collaborative organization. Its mission is to support the design of expert and future-ready learning that is accessible, equitable, and relevant for all learners. So it's all about building capacity, and we're working hard to try and build that UDL coalition throughout the state so that it is an everyday term that everyone's talking about and implementing. We want to be sure that you know about our coalition contact list. So the bit.ly is right here. It's / or / I should say, CAUDLC, which is kind of our acronym. Please feel free to join our listserv so that we're building up our our participants to share information with. What we do, we work on capacity building. The UDL network actually is the reason why I think we started the coalition. And the development of the work going forward. We have a website page on the Orange County Department of Education, and we try to put in updates there. We also have a Gmail that you can contact us with questions as well, California UDL Coalition at gmail.com. Some upcoming events, CAST. I don't know if anyone in the audience is from CAST today, but when you go to the slides, you can go to these offerings that they have beyond the basics course, which is coming up the 13th and 14th of the month, so that's actually tomorrow. They have their implementation academy starting the 20th and 21st, both those dates in October. And then registration for the IRN Summit is open, and I think early registration is you need to register by November 1 to get the discount. It's going to be in Florida, I believe in Orlando. I think it's still going to be there, March 14th and 15th. Also, some of you may be registered to attend the Inclusion Collaborative conference on October 18th and 20th. My understanding that it is sold out, so that's great news. So if you're planning to attend, I know you're going to get some great information there. I believe Shelley Moore is going to be one of their keynotes. And sorry about that. Let's move forward. And our next UDL network will be January 24th. And our last one for this fiscal year will be May 9. So be sure to share the registration link. And also, of course, we're looking for voices from the field. So we're so grateful to have Modoc present today and share their journey. And they've been doing some great work for the last 5 years implementing UDL. Rhonda, do you want to talk about the PLI for a moment?
Yes, I'd love to. So please save the dates for the California MTSS Professional Learning Institute. We are scheduled to hold it July 18th through the 20th. It's in person at the Anaheim Convention Center. And as with previous years, we will have a UDL strand throughout. Our deep dive sessions, as well as the breakout sessions, will all include content specific to UDL, in addition to sessions to support the whole child. So save the date for that and start your travel plans now.
Yeah,
and I did see there was a question in the chat also. I'd like to just answer to everybody. When will the recording of today's meeting be shared? And so as soon as it uploads and everything, it should be by today. That recording will be in the folder.
Great. Thanks, Rhonda. Okay, so were there any questions that came up other than that, Rhonda, in the chat?
I am not seeing any other questions that came in.
Okay.
So Fred and Rhonda, I put our coaching email address in the chat. That goes to all three of us. It goes to Jen, Susan, and I all simultaneously. So if you have questions, please feel free to email that email address and all three of us will get it.
Yeah, because some of the folks that joined maybe a little bit late and didn't get your whole presentation, they may want to ask you some questions, right? Okay, good. All right. Well, in closing, I already mentioned the next meeting. If you have resources you want to share, please do so. I think a lot of this we've already just covered in closing. So I do have an optimistic closing that I do want to share with you next. So did you know that October 14th is National Dessert Day? So people around the country indulge every October 14th on National Dessert Day. I don't know. I don't need October 14th to indulge in dessert because I can do that any day. But it is kind of fun to have a day to celebrate. So what is your go-to, or if you're not a sweet person, I know you're all sweet people, but if you're not into sweets, maybe you're more into something savory. But for now, we're just going to do ice cream, pie, cheesecake, cookies, or cake. Or if that's not your thing, maybe your friend's favorite thing. And we're going to just do another quick waterfall. So are you an ice cream, a pie, a cheesecake, cookie, a cake? I'm all of them. So I'd be 1 through 5. So why don't we go ahead and on the count of 3, enter in the chat what your number would be. Is it a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And here we go. Ready, set, 1, 2, 3. Cookies. Yes. I knew those M&Ms would get you, Kim. That's fun. Good. Okay. So on behalf of the California UDL Network, I want to thank all of you for attending today. Rhonda, thank you so much for co-piloting. I couldn't have done it without you. And Chrissy, Susan, and Jen from Modoc, thank you again for your wonderful presentation. And I think we're right on time, everyone. So we will say goodbye, adjourn. And thanks everyone for joining us today, and have a great day. Make UDL happen. Take care.